Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We have just completed the 2037 first year player draft, and now we are headed to the midpoint of the season. 37 and 31 record for Buffalo at this point. We would not be in the playoffs if the playoffs were to start today. We're 3.5 behind third place in the NL East. And we are actually half a game out of the fourth and final wild card spot in the National League. So we've got some work to do, but the team is 12-6 here in the month of June, playing our best baseball of the year. So we're going to probably spend the next 13 games till we get to the midpoint of the season not really doing too much. Two areas that we'll likely be focusing on as we get closer to the trade deadline are adding an arm or two for our bullpen, where we had some pretty significant injuries this year. Notably, thinking about those injuries, our closer, Pat Mems, is out for the year. Rule 5 acquisition, Robbie McCracken, likely out for the year. And then free agent acquisition, the veteran left-hander Eddie Mosley, now out for the year after he hurt himself during his rehab assignment in AAA from an earlier injury. So 3 arms out of our bullpen. Right now we've brought up Adrian Morejon from AAA, the veteran. We brought up Mike Waters. I can't really call him a youngster anymore at age 25, but a guy who's been up and down the last couple of years. He ended up in AAA more because he had options than because we didn't think he was one of the top 13 pitchers on our roster. And then Darnell Polite, who we picked up on the waiver wire right when the season started. So those are the 3 new guys or newer additions to the team that have roster spots right now because of those injuries to Mosley, McCracken, and Mems. Apparently, if you are a pitcher and your last name starts with M, you're going to have some injuries for us this year. And you can see that Morejon is actually out for a day with nausea. Let's hope that the youngster Alexis Mendoza, who's having a respectable rookie year for us, doesn't run into the same fate. So we've looked a little bit at the trade block, and there's not a ton that's all that interesting to us out there right now. Pierce George, the excellent starting pitcher, I believe with the Cardinals, is far and away the top player that's available. But the Cardinals are looking for an incredible amount for him right now, so not someone that we are going to go for. Juan Reynoso, who's with the Red Sox right now, is marginally intriguing to me. Not making a ton of money. He's a guy who could start or relieve. He's also a guy who, over the course of his career, has been a bit above average, although has struggled in the ERA department these last couple of years in Pittsburgh and now with Boston. Don't think he's a world beater. I don't even know that he's all that much of an upgrade in terms of his overall arsenal to some of the guys that I just talked about. But he is a guy who, as I mentioned, can start or relieve, which could be helpful to us. Ground ball pitcher, throws in the mid to high 90s. He's got some stuff going for him. We've checked him out, and they're basically not really looking for much of anything at all for him. So I think I just got to decide if I bring him on, who would I want to send down. Could end up being Morejon, actually, probably more than Polite or Waters or even Wenzel right now. I don't know that Morejon would accept a demotion to the minors, even though he's on a minor league contract. He just has to clear waivers, so we could try to get him down there, I guess, if we wanted to be sneaky. Since he's got that nausea right now and he's out for a day, we could actually place him on the IL as well to avoid having to send him down right now and perhaps have him being claimed. So although it will, if we move on from Morejon for the time being, leave us again right-handed dominant in the pen, I am getting to the point where Isidro Ochoa could be in jeopardy of losing his spot in the rotation, and having someone on the team who's capable of filling in as a fifth starter could be useful to me. Polite and Varejo, as well as Wenzel and Walborn, all kind of have the stamina to be a starter, but none of them really have a four-pitch arsenal. The plan was that if we needed a fifth starter this year, it would likely have been Mr. Mosley. The other option is our longtime starter, Hayden Yinger, who does have 3 above average to borderline excellent pitches. He's kind of a 4+ inning guy now with his stamina, but he could certainly start for us in a pinch if we needed someone for a start or two. But I think I may look to make a trade, because as I mentioned, the Red Sox, when I checked in, were basically looking for just about nothing. So it might be time to see if we can make our first trade of this hopefully active approach to the trade deadline for Mr. Reynoso. And it was not hard at all to get a deal for Reynoso. He's arbitration eligible, expected to make about $4 million next year. If you look closely, you notice that he wants to be a closer, so he's probably not happy about that, and he may not be happy about that with us, because he's definitely not going to be our closer. But the Red Sox will keep his salary, and all we have to send is David Alvarado, who is international free agent signing from 2033. He's been respectable the last 2 years in rookie ball, but certainly does not have a profile that suggests he's ever going to be a major leaguer. So we're going to go ahead and complete that trade to bring on Mr. Reynoso. Hopefully there will be a better reliever, or maybe multiple better relievers available in free agency, not free agency, but available on the trade market, either because they are put on the trade block, or we just put a deal together for someone who's not on the trade block. Hopefully there will be higher end guys that we're able to add over the next month plus than Reynoso, but I think with the fact that he can start or relieve, he is not a bad option to try to bring on board. And we are going to make room for him on our 26-man roster by actually just going ahead and waiving and DFAing Mr. Morejon. Hopefully he'll make it down to AAA, but if he doesn't, it's probably not the end of the world. Reynoso goes on to the major league team. We will use him as a long reliever and set him up as an emergency starting pitcher for us. So one move down as far as improving our bullpen. The other area where we may need to make improvement is center field. And when we get to the midway point of the season, we'll check in on how everyone on our team is doing and start to really more formally formulate the plan in our heads for what we want to accomplish in the month of July as we approach the trade deadline. And as our Buffalo Wings reach the end of July and the calendar turns to June, continue to be playing our best baseball of the year. We're still in third place, but our record is up to 45-32, and we are just half a game behind in the National League East. The Phillies and the Braves both tied in front of us. You can see we've won 8 in a row now, and we are up a game and a half for a wild card spot at this point. So from that perspective, things are going well. We've just had our best month of the year. Deshaun Seifu, trying to lead the league in steals for a 10th consecutive year, is still a couple behind Jaheim Faggins to lead the league in that category. And he's really the only one of our players who's on the leaderboard this year. But the performance, as I mentioned, in the month of June was by far the best of the year, a 20-7 record, and we're still a game below Pythagorean expectations, which would actually put us first in the National League East. So I don't hate where we are at this point. We're second in the National League in runs scored, and you can see we're in the top handful of most offensive categories. Home runs, where we knew we'd be lacking a bit after losing our big home run hitter Shamar Jenneret. We're middle of the pack, tied for 8th in the National League. First in stolen bases, but we're not particularly good at base running. 8th in the league in runs allowed, so we're slowly making progress on that front. The bullpen ERA, despite the injuries, is second in the National League. Starters ERA is 9th, which is certainly disappointing. We're a middle-of-the-pack team in defensive efficiency, above average in terms of zone rating. And we're generally in the top half of the league in just about every pitching category, but not as dominant a pitching staff as we have had in previous seasons. But we do have some things positive on that front, most notably the young pitcher Alexis Mendoza was named the Outstanding Rookie of the Month, 3-0 record with a 1.19 ERA in 37 2/3 innings. Struck out 30, held opponents to a .71 batting average, and he's now 6-4 on the year with a 3.74 ERA. So Mendoza, who was a 4th-round pick 5 years ago in 2032, viewed as the number 20 prospect in baseball. We went pitcher heavy several drafts in a row when we felt we needed to bolster the pitching prospects across our system, and Mendoza certainly one of the prizes of that effort thus far. And we're off to a decent start in July with a 3-2 record, although we've slipped to a game and a half out of first, and we're still in 3rd place. So the teams that we're chasing, you can see we split with Philadelphia. But Atlanta's won 3 in a row at this point, so they are 1.5 up on us, and Philadelphia is half a game ahead of us here. Just past the midway point, 82 games into the season with a 48-34 record, and we are 2 up for a wild card spot at this point. So not hating where we are in the standings, and as I've talked about, we've been playing our best ball of the season over the past month plus. Doesn't mean that we're not going to make some moves here as we approach the trade deadline over the next 3.5 weeks, but we can hopefully do it from a bit of a position of strength, since if the season were to end today, we would be back in the playoffs for a 10th consecutive season. And not too much has changed. I only haven't played 5 games here in the month of July, but before we get into how our individual players are performing, take a mid-season look, and clearly not too much has changed in terms of the team batting rankings. Still in the top handful of the categories in the National League. The exceptions are batting average, where we are 6th, home runs, where we've slipped to 9th, and strikeouts, where we rank 10th. We've improved 1 spot to 8th in the National League in runs allowed, 6th in starters ERA at this point, 2nd in the bullpen ERA, and 3rd overall in ERA. So a bit surprising to be 8th in runs allowed when we've got the 3rd best combined ERA in the National League at this point. Given that our defensive efficiency is average and our zone rating's a little better than average, Not really sure exactly what to attribute that to. Could have thought it was a lot of unearned runs. Maybe when we do make errors, they're just ending up being particularly costly. And we're in the top half of the National League in pretty much every pitching category, or actually, we're in the top half of the National League in every pitching category at this point. So, again, I think we want to make this team better as we try to, as I talked about earlier, earn a 10th straight trip to the playoffs and hopefully defend our world championship from the 2036 season. But don't feel like we have to be panic stricken in some of the potential decisions that we'll be making in the coming weeks. So, turning to how our players have performed over this first half of the season, nice to see our 1 and 2 starters, Barajas and Shazier, both having pretty good seasons in the same year. They have identical 7 and 5 records and 17 starts. Barajas with a 2.49 ERA, striking out a batter per inning, 2.1 WAR at this point. ERA plus and FIP minus, both well above average for last year's Cy Young Award winner. And Sincere Shazier looks like he's on his way to the best season of his career, striking out a little more than a batter per inning. ERA plus and FIP minus, both very strong, and a 2.2 WAR on the season. Juan Estrada has been pitching a bit better of late and is our biggest winner with a 9 and 4 record. But the 4.91 ERA is certainly not optimal. You can see his ERA was up by a run a year ago after he led the league in ERA in 2035, and it's up by over a run this year as well. So Estrada certainly not quite as lights out as a pitcher as he has been in previous seasons. His batting stats are down from the brilliant year he had a year ago when he hit 345 and 333 at-bats for us. The batting average is dipped to 275, but he is pretty proficient at drawing walks with 30 in the 47 games that he started. So he's got a 380 on base percentage and still a 114 WRC plus. Not the same, as I said, batting year that he had a year ago, and not the same pitching year that he had a year ago at this point, but still a pretty valuable player for us overall. Just talked about Alexis Mendoza a few days ago. Won the National League Rookie of the Month for June, 6 and 5 record with a 3.79 ERA, striking out almost a batter per inning. He has been a very good and cost-effective replacement for Jorge Carrillo in the rotation. And our number 5 starter, Isidro Ochoa, pitching a bit better of late. The record of 4 and 3 is okay, especially after that 7 and 14 record last year. But his ERA is still 5.23. The reason I probably give him a little bit longer leash is his Sierra is under 4, and he does have a 3.43 BABIP against him. So my hope is he's just gotten a little unlucky. That said, with his average stuff, he may just be somebody that people can really rake against. But as long as we're healthy, unlikely that he'll be starting for us in the playoffs. And I'd feel pretty good about a rotation of Barajas, Shazier, Estrada, and the youngster Mendoza. If that's the 4-man rotation, we do end up going in the playoffs. Elvin Jimenez has taken over as our closer with the injury to Mems. 5 and 4 record with 10 saves for us, 189 ERA, better than a strikeout per inning, a WAR of almost 2. Happy with what he's been doing. Lauren Walborn remains an outstanding stopper. He's pitched over 70 innings for us with a 2.55 ERA, 1.7 WAR. The stopper role has been a huge role for Walborn since we brought him over. He's led the National League in games and holds every season since he joins us. Certainly looks like he's probably well on his way to leading the National League in holds this year. Who knows about games, but he has been a very valuable part of our bullpen and a very quantitatively important part of our bullpen too. With 70 and 2/3 innings, he's pitched almost as many innings as our third and fifth starters, despite working out of the pen. Hayden Yinger, the veteran, 2-1 record, a couple of saves, 3 holds, more than a strikeout per inning. Good, solid bullpen arm for us. Johanny Varejo is a guy who was a 5th-round draft pick back in 2028. He's had a nice career for us out of the bullpen. 37 strikeouts in 24 and 2/3 innings this year with a 2.55 ERA. He's very effective. Mike Waters has been good since he's come up. 30 strikeouts in 24 innings. Darnell Polite picked off the waiver wire, 60 strikeouts and 54 and a third innings. The lefty Matthew Wenzel has not been good in limited action. 5.87 ERA over 15 and a third innings. He's given up 5 home runs. Doesn't have great movement on his pitches. If you were wondering, when we sent Morejon down, nobody claimed him, but he did refuse the option to AAA after he had cleared waivers, so we had to release him. We tried to trade him. There was nothing we could do there. So adding a bigger and better left-handed arm for the bullpen than Wenzel probably makes sense as far as I'm concerned. And then Juan Reynoso, who we just traded for, very small sample size, but 12 strikeouts in the 7 and a third innings is certainly a very nice start to his Buffalo Wings career. So if we got to a situation when we're thinking about what we might do, if we got to a situation where Pierce George was just going to be given away by St. Louis, we would certainly add a big-time starting pitcher in the final year of his contract. He would consider a trade to us, but when I checked in, the Cardinals are perhaps not irrationally looking for a ton for Pierce George, but bringing on a player like him who's a 3-time Cy Young Award winner and a perennial all-star would certainly bolster an already strong rotation. You can see, unfortunately, there's not a lot of lefties available. Zane Adams and Jaquan Albin, Brandon Barrera. There's others available too, as I can move through all of the players who are available. So it doesn't look like there's any real top of the line lefties who are available quite yet. But again, over 3.5 weeks till the trade deadline, and we can always try to trade for someone who's not on the trade block. So feel pretty good about the pitching at this point. If we can add a great player like Pierce, we certainly would do that, but realistically, maybe add a left-handed arm or two for the bullpen, and I'll feel pretty good about what our pitching staff looks like for these final few months of the regular season. So we'll turn now to our everyday players who, as we've talked about, have scored a lot of runs this year despite not hitting a ton of home runs. Andres Medina is our starting catcher, 244 average with 7 homers and 234 at-bats. Below average offensive player, but with his great defense and the captain personality, a pretty valuable player for us right now. He's headed into free agency, and he's likely looking for a ton of money, so no guarantees that he'll be back with us next year, but he's done a nice job for us this year, which is good because Walt Miller has been a disaster after starting more than Medina, at least during the regular season over the past couple of years. Miller has really struggled as our backup catcher, hitting just a $139, 1 homer, and 72 at-bats with a putrid 24 WRC plus. Even with his above-average catcher ability and arm, he's been a below replacement level player. Looking at his ratings, I think he's probably just gotten a bit unlucky. You can see his BABIP is only 214. So don't think we really need to do much of anything at catcher, at least for the course of this season. Clearly, if there's an all-star catcher available for nothing, we'd consider bringing them on board since we are a win-now team. But I think there's probably positions other than catcher that we're going to need to focus on more as we get closer to the trade deadline. Turning to our infielders, and we'll start with the two young first basemen, Arturo Flores, formerly one of the top prospects in our system, having a better year than he did last year, hitting 263 with 4 homers and 16 ribbies. Only 76 at-bats because we're only starting him regularly against left-handed pitching. But that 125 WRC plus is certainly productive. Another guy with a captain personality. He's just pretty pedestrian against right-handed pitching, which is why we think we can kind of hopefully maximize his value playing him primarily against left-handed pitching, although that does mean there's a lot of days when he's not in the lineup. Joe Gallagher is the youngster, number 9 prospect in baseball who's put up stupid home run numbers in the minors the last couple of years. He's hitting 238 for us, does have 19 homers and 54 ribbies and 307 at-bats. He's struck out 96 times, but a 114 WRC plus. He is not Shamar Jenneret. You can see his WAR is barely above replacement level at this point because he is so useless defensively. We've typically been playing him as a designated hitter. Yeah, you can see he's never actually played anywhere in the field. So hopefully he will continue to improve with the bat. Obviously doesn't bring much to the table on the base paths or defensively or even in his personality and influence on others. But that said, a guy who looks like he's on pace to probably hit 35 to 40 home runs with over 100 ribbies as a rookie is still a useful bat, particularly for a team like ours that struggles a bit offensively. An episode or two ago, I can't remember who it was, but one of the viewers and commenters brought up that maybe we were having some issues in our clubhouse, perhaps centered around Gallagher, that were impacting our slow start to the season. I replied to the comment with the information that it didn't look like we really had any personality issues at that point, but can't hurt to check in again. And outside of the selfish Gallagher, you can see we've got a pretty good clubhouse, a couple of captains, a bunch of leaders, a couple of spark plugs, and Andres Medina is keeping things running so far. No one has any complaints about team chemistry, and team chemistry is bordering on ecstatic. So even though Gallagher isn't necessarily the greatest clubhouse influence, to this point it seems like it is pretty under control. So with the two youngsters, Flores and Gallagher, talked about, we'll turn to first baseman / outfielder Mike Heiner, former first-round draft pick in 2032. I guess he's having a little bit of a bounce-back year this year, hitting 279, 9 homers and 55 ribbies, for 4 for 4 on the base paths, but not nearly as active as he's been in previous seasons. But a 119 WRC plus. He's another guy who's not incredibly talented defensively, but an important left-handed hitter for us. We don't have a ton of those, especially with power. And Heiner, with his 9 home runs, is not Shamar Jenneret or Hank Aaron or Barry Bonds or Babe Ruth as far as his home run proclivity, but still a useful offensive player for us. Speaking of useful offensive players, Deshaun Seifu, as we talked about, is second in the National League in steals right now as he attempts to lead the league in steals for a 10th consecutive year. hitting under 300 with a 292 average for the first time in several seasons, but does have 27 doubles, 7 triples already. 119 WRC plus is down from where it's been the last few years. We signed him to an extension this past off season, and thus far his speed is holding up pretty well, even though he is now 33 years old. The Iron Man continues to be on track for what we hope will be a potential Hall of Fame career. Should get the 2,000th hit of his career sometime in August, most likely. And he should have his 800th career steal before the All-Star break. And looking at the at-bat, run, hit, double, and triple numbers that he's put up so far, seems plausible that in addition to being in competition for leading the league in steals for a 10th consecutive year, he could also end up leading the league again in some of those other categories where he has been frequently among the top players in the National League over the course of his career. Pretty ridiculous that at this point he has led the National League in at-bats and hits for 4 consecutive seasons at this point, in addition to the 9 straight years he's led the league in steals. Turning to the left side of our infield, Joe Edwards is our third baseman, hitting just 231, but does have 17 homers and 38 ribbies, and he's also walked 42 times a year after leading the National League with 104 walks. So with the batting average dipping, his on-base percentage is not as high as it's often been. Still an above-average offensive player, a decent defensive third baseman. He's starting to get expensive for what he is. His arbitration number next year expected to be over $9 million. Don't know if he's someone we're going to be able to afford to make a long-term commitment to, or choose to make a long-term commitment to, given our financial limitations. But at this point, he's still a valuable player for us. And then we've got the platoon at second base, Steve Anderson, the 25-year-old. Batting average has fallen to 230, but he does have 7 homers and 38 ribbies. Below average offensive player, but still a 1.1 WAR, thanks to decent defense for the young shortstop. And he platoons with Tim Hull, who is also struggling with the bat this year, hitting just 211, 6 doubles and 2 homers and 95 at-bats. Well below average offensive production from him for a second consecutive season. He's a pretty versatile defensive player. He's got some good personality traits and is popular with the fans. And the bat is not horrible. As a platoon guy, I would think that, or would hope that, his numbers would be a little better, since he's only starting against left-handed pitchers, where he does have some decent gap power and doesn't strike out all that much, although the rest of his profile in the contact, power, and eye categories that I care about the most is very average, or the definition of average. So I would hope he'd be a little more productive. Don't feel like there's a ton we have to do to the infield. I like these guys. If there was a great shortstop out there, with the lack of production we've gotten offensively from Anderson and Hull, would certainly look at it. But I can't imagine there are any Ernie Banks or Derek Jeter type shortstops available on the trade market. So we'll turn now to our outfielders. Bobby Bolig, another one along with Heiner of our left-handed hitters with a little pop in the bat. And he's had a nice bounce back year this year, 283 with 11 homers and 258 ribbies. 17 of 20 on the base paths, and his WRC plus is up to 139 from 122 a year ago. So a nice offensive year from Bolig, who plays primarily against right-handed pitchers. Dylan Carlson, who we signed as a free agent or brought on with a trade through Boston, where they kept a bunch of his salary, has been disappointing. There's no other way to look at his performance. Hitting a .180 with 6 doubles and 6 homers and 255 at bats. So he's been a well below average offensive player, only a bit above replacement level overall. We're expecting him to be more productive offensively than he has been. I think at this point, we may look to play somebody else against right-handed pitching. Have to look at exactly what his stats look like at this point. 74 WRC plus overall against left-handed pitching. He's actually been a pretty average-ish offensive player, but against right-handed pitching, he's been pretty putrid, hitting a buck 62, 5 homers and 204 at bats. I don't necessarily love the other options we have to play center field against right-handed pitching, because they're both right-handed hitters in Gaglia and Hardage. But at this point, Carlson's not getting the job done, so that's a position we may look to improve in the trade market, and at the very least maybe give Gaglia or Hardage an opportunity to play more regularly in center against right-handed pitching. Their ratings don't suggest that they are better than Carlson, but Carlson's been so bad, probably time to give one of them a shot. Gaglia hitting a nice 329, not a ton of power. Don't expect a ton of power from him. 3 homers and 155 at-bats. But he does have 11 doubles, 2 triples, and he's 15 out of 16 on the base paths. So a 129 WRC plus. Player who's fast, excellent outfield range. As I said, against right-handed pitching, he's got the same type of profile that he has against left-handed pitching, but with how disappointing Mr. Carlson has been offensively, I think it's probably time to give Gaglia a chance to see what he can do against right-handed pitching with a little more regular playing time. Tyreek Hardage is another young center fielder for us, hitting just 228 this year with only 1 homer and 92 ribbies. Slightly above replacement level despite his below average offensive metrics, because he is a pretty good defensive outfielder, particularly in left field where he has been playing for us against left-handed pitching, but given that Gaglia is having the better offensive season, I think it makes sense to let Gaglia get the playing time against right-handed pitching. You can see Hardage is definitely a guy whose splits favor playing him primarily against left-handed pitching. Not that he's been all that effective this year doing it, but it is a relatively small sample size since it doesn't seem like we faced a ton of lefty starters thus far. So as I think about the team, center field, we're giving Gaglia the opportunity to start every day at this point in center field. Carlson perhaps playing only against left-handed pitching, maybe a bit more productive. But if there was a big-time center fielder available, that would be something for us to consider as a rental. And again, if there's a big-time player at almost any position except for second base, we probably should think about it and at least investigate it. But I don't feel like there's any glaring holes on our team. Taking a look at the batters available on the trading block, catcher Daniel Maldonado certainly looks like he's got a nice bat for a catcher. Don't love the average defense. But would certainly be an upgrade offensively. I can't imagine his price is going to be something that we would view palatable, given that we kind of like our situation at catcher. Second baseman Jose Salas, would allow us to upgrade defensively over Seifu and maybe move Seifu to third base. But he's 34 years old, wrecked physically, making a ton of money, and I don't know that he's really much better offensively than some of the guys we have who are struggling. I mean, he is a guy who's a four-time All-Star. He's obviously a very accomplished player, but at this point in his career, don't know that he's an obvious upgrade. Kind of just hone in on any potential center fielders who are out there. Salas, I guess, is a guy who theoretically can play center, but with 50 range, probably not exactly what we're looking to do. Doesn't look like, with the exception of Christian Vaquero, there are any pure center fielders out there. Vaquero, switch hitter, fragile, not making a ton of money, decent range. I don't see where, looking at his ratings, against right-handed pitchers, where he's a little more effective with a little more home run pop in his bat, but I don't see where that's necessarily a huge upgrade for us over what we've currently got. Luca Reyes, familiar name, who used to be a member of our team several years ago, doesn't really have the range that we'd be looking for in a center fielder. Guy who came up through our system, had a couple years for us back in 2029 and 2030. And, what trade was he involved in for us? The John Featherston trade. He was with Ali Ostendorf and Kerry Carpenter to bring on Featherston, who was our center fielder for many years, as well as Ochoa, who's now in our rotation. Well, since we're talking about Ali, let's see what he's doing this year. We picked him second overall. He never really panned out. 5-5 this year with a 2.74 ERA, 2.6 WAR. So it looks like Ali's kind of having the best year of his career as a 28-year-old potentially this year. He's become a good, not great, although that 2.74 ERA, if he keeps that up, seems like he's finally figured things out with his control, with just 16 walks in 85 and a third innings this year, after walking over 70 batters each of the previous seasons. For some reason, we've only got, we do have high scouting accuracy on him. And it looks like his control, at least according to our scout right now, is average at this point. So, seems like it's improved a bit over the last year and a half from where we thought it was. So, nice to see Ali with a productive first half in Atlanta. It's conceivable that we could be facing off against him in a big game in the playoffs again at some point. So I don't see any obvious solutions to what we want to do on the trade block at this point. Doesn't mean over the next couple of weeks that there can't be more players added. And as I've talked about, also doesn't mean that we can't just go looking for a big-time center fielder or a great left-handed arm who don't happen to be being actively marketed by their team. We can still try to bring somebody like that on board. So I think a left-handed arm is certainly something we have to do over the next few weeks. Other than that, if there's a big-time center fielder, would love to do that, but I don't feel like we're in a position where we have to go crazy. Feel like the team has righted itself over the last month and a half. We're in a position where we'd be in the playoffs if the season ended today, with the way we've been playing recently and the fact that we're only a game and a half out of first. I think another NL East title is certainly possible for us. I don't want to say likely, but I think even with this team, probably a coin flip whether or not we get past Philadelphia and Atlanta to be the division champions once again. So I don't think I'm going to go crazy in the trade market, but definitely want to add a lefty arm or two. And if there's someone else who can help our team, we'll certainly investigate it and see if we're willing to pay the price. If you've got thoughts on what we should do or not do in free agency, would love to hear them in the comments. And we will come back and not free agency, the trade market. If you've got thoughts on what we could do in the trade market, would love to hear those in the comments. And in our next episode, we'll find out exactly what we decide to do to hopefully position this team to repeat. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.